Are you someone who has disability insurance or is thinking of getting it? Well, keep listening as we discuss the pros and cons of disability insurance and how you should know whether or not you should get it. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Brittany Halford.
And I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. Alicia, can we talk about one of the most important money moves we've made as doctors? And I don't know about you, but for me, when I think about this, it's actually insurance. Yes, I know it's not sexy, but it is absolutely essential, especially disability insurance.
Facts. I got mine right after med school, before residency even started. And let me tell you, Prati Botto at PKA Insurance Group made the whole process so smooth. He actually cared, broke down everything, explained the fine print, and got me the best policy for the best price.
And what I love is that he treats everyone like that, residents, attendings, even docs on visas. He literally got you. He's super responsive, super knowledgeable. And if there's a better deal out there, he will tell you.
Oh, and if you're healthy, you could get approved for up to $10 million in life insurance. So not just disability insurance, in only 5 minutes. No labs, no hassle.
So if you're serious about protecting your income and your family, call 1-800-258-1018.
Or email pradeep at pkainsurance.com.
All right. So, Alicia, I got a text from you a couple nights ago. You're like, hey, I'm rooting for your team. And I'm going to be honest with you all, people. I'm not as much of a sports fan as Dr. Alicia Taylor. So I'm like, what is this girl talking about? I was like, oh, Michigan must be playing the next game. Today must be the final game because they were playing, I think it was Arizona. They were playing on Sunday probably because Brooke is like all into it. Whenever my husband has a game on, she's asking all these questions. So I'm like watching peripherally as I'm trying to prepare lunches and doing all the things. So I'm like, oh, let me turn on the game because since Alicia's watching, she's already said she's rooting for my team. Let's see what's going on. And then I watched about maybe 10 minutes. And I was like, you know what? They're not paying my bills. I got work to do. I got sleep to sleep.
That's so funny. I text you and I was like, I don't even know if she knows the game's on tonight. That's one of the things that I actually love about sports is the joy of victory, but then there's the agony of defeat.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced both of those this weekend and over the last couple of weeks. And so I've had some very high highs and some very low lows when it comes to sports. So much so that I ask myself, I'm like, why do I let myself get so worked up? Why am I letting myself and my emotions get into this? But for those who may not be aware, we are recording this in early April. And so March Madness has just happened. And so we are talking about college basketball. For those who know, I went to Duke for undergrad. So my first love, shall we say, is my Duke Blue Devils. But I also recently worked at UCLA. I lived in LA and I worked at UCLA before moving back to Atlanta. And so for this March Madness, I had two schools I was rooting for, if you will. One of my schools, my beloved Duke Blue Devils, just lost in astounding fashion. And so I had experienced, Brittany, the agony of defeat, actually, because both the women and the men lost. Now, the women, I wasn't as surprised because they kind of played better than I expected and made it further in the tournament than I expected. But the men, 2 years in a row, Brittany, we had the game in the bag. And then there's this last minute shot that just it was a dagger through my heart. You should have seen my face. And I was like, are you kidding me? We had the National Player of the Year. We had the best recruiting class. We had already beat Michigan. I already knew it was going to be Duke and Michigan battling it out. And I was going to come on this podcast and I was going to brag again. And when I tell you I was so heartbroken, and the team that beat us was UConn. And I was like, there's no way I'm cheering for UConn. So I will be cheering for Brittany's team. That's why I text you. I was like,
well, I love that. Thank you for supporting us. You still blue. You just switched over to a different shade a little bit. I'm going to say go Wolverines, so we're very clear on which blue team I am talking about. It's so nice to celebrate the victories. And to your point, Leisha, like you have a lot of emotional buy-in in these games. And I think that Brooke is very similar because recently, it's actually a little disappointing, but recently I was like, oh, Brooke, wear this, just throw this on. And it was a Detroit Lions fleece. And she was like, no, every time I wear that, my classmates give me a lot of pushback and they're talking about why do I like the Lions? I should like the Patriots.
Oh,
So, yes, sports can be really, really big and emotional. I don't know if she's gotten to the point where you have yet. You know, she's 7, so she got some work to do to become next Dr. Alicia Taylor, and where she's like, no, I bleed blue. This is it. It's my blue. I'm a Dookie or whatever team, you know, and she just really supports that with full support and confidence. So I hope that she gets there because even at this young age, sports can be very heavy.
yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, that's so funny because you live in Boston, right? So Brooke going to preschool, daycare, first grade, whatever in Boston, her friends are like, why are we not a Patriots fan, right?
Right.
And she is probably not about to be like, well, my mom is from Detroit and my mom likes the Lions, even though my mom isn't really a big sports fan. And so it's like, look, mom, I'm not about to go through that today. So I appreciate her standing up for herself. Brooke is what, 6 or 7?
She's 7.
She's 7. She's standing up for her 7-year-old self and said, no, mom, not today. I appreciate it. But yeah, so my beloved Duke Blue Devils lost. My UCLA Bruins won. I was so excited, man. I knew those women when they were freshmen. So it's like seeing your kids grow up and then they won the national title. I was cheering so loudly for them. I'm so happy for them and all of my colleagues and friends that still live in LA. So one of my teams won the Natty, one did not win, but at least your team won too. So we both kind of experienced a little bit of that victory recently. So good for both of us, I guess.
Love that. As we're thinking about just like celebration and representation of teams and programs, I think we should talk about in this season of being early April disability insurance. And I think about this as it stems from the work that I do with residents, physicians. And I know you work with residents as well. And you got your disability insurance policy in medical school,
Right after I graduated.
right after you graduated from medical school. Okay.
Mhm.
So I got mine then upon graduation in residency.
Okay.
And I acutely recall this guy, he's coming and he talks to us and he kind of talks about disability insurance. I'm like, okay, this is something that I definitely need, but which policy do I need? No one really talks to us about the specifics. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode today. Leisha, I know you know a lot about insurance. You have your own disability insurance policy. I'm curious to know right now, why did you get it after graduating from medical school instead of waiting till later during your residency time?
Thank you for that question because I think it's really relevant here. There may be some people listening that are still in training and don't have disability insurance, or maybe some early career attending physicians who don't have their own policy. Maybe they have some free through their employer, but they don't yet have their own policy. For me personally, I wanted to get it right after I graduated med school for a variety of reasons. One, it is cheaper when you get it when you're younger. And I knew that was the youngest I was ever going to be. It's cheaper when you're younger because disability insurance is supposed to replace your income if you cannot work. And so the chances of you becoming disabled increase as you age. And so it is cheaper when you get it when you're younger. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is it's cheaper when you're healthier. So when I had graduated from medical school, I don't remember how old I was. Maybe I was in my mid to late 20s at that time, something along those lines. And I was very healthy. I didn't have any medical diagnoses or anything. And thankfully that hasn't changed, but there was no guarantee, right? You never know if you might get diagnosed with a chronic illness or with a mental health condition or have some sort of car accident or something that prevents you from being able to work as a physician. And so because I was young and I was healthy, it was going to be a lot cheaper for me. The third reason why I got it after graduating from medical school is because I wanted to replace my income if I got disabled while I was in residency. So for me, it was like, okay, Lord forbid something bad happened to me. I might be able to get some small amount from my employer, but that may not be sufficient to last me until I'm age 65. Because at that time, and I think it is still the case now, most residencies will supply their residents or their trainees with some amount of disability insurance. And usually that amount is about 60% of their salary. So if a resident physician is making around $60,000 a year, then the amount that they would receive as a yearly benefit from disability insurance would be like a little over $40,000 a year. There are some people who can live comfortably on $40,000 a year. I am not one of those people. I needed a little bit more than what my job would have supplied. And so that was the third reason why I got it, was because I knew that if I were to get disabled while I was in training, I could not survive on the amount of the benefit that I got for free from my job. I needed something else to supplement me. And then while I was getting that disability insurance policy, one of the things that I made sure it had in there was a future upgrade option, so that once I became an attending physician, once my income increased, the benefit that I received would also increase, or had the ability to increase. And so those are some of the reasons why I got it when I was in training.
Well, Leisha, you just dropped a whole episode in that like 3 minutes that I don't know, maybe it was 30 seconds, people. I don't know. I wasn't tracking. And that was so informative. The song Forever Young. We're not going to be forever young, people. And you will not be forever healthy. And unfortunately, sickness is unpredictable. It doesn't alert us to say, hey, you're going to get sick in the next 6 months. You should probably get your disability insurance policy. So, very astute of you to recognize that. And also to understand that as you grow in your career, your income is going to change. And you don't want to just be stuck at having a benefit of 60% of $60,000 or whatever you made in residency. Because as an attending, you're going to be making a lot more than that. So, having that future benefit, increase in benefit rider is really important to add in to your policy, even if you were to get a policy today. So, all right, so many other nuggets, right? What I see happening right now, unfortunately, Leisha, and I don't know if this is the same where you are, I see that there are these insurance brokers that come to the residency program. And unlike my experience, where they're independent brokers and they're like, hey, Brittany, you need this. I'm going to shop you at all of the 5 carriers. Like, I'm going to see the best that I can get for you. Right?
Yeah.
They are coming and they're selling what is called this guaranteed standard issue policy, which is great because it's guaranteed. You don't have to go through the medical examinations that we would for our independent policies. And it's pretty quick, right? You fill out some quick paperwork. They're like, okay, you're approved. This is the amount you're approved for. There's not much discussion, not much delay. You are guaranteed to get a policy. But what my fear is that us as physicians, yeah, we're human beings, but we're not cookie cutter. Everybody has their own needs, has their own desires, and we really need someone who can sit down and talk about what are your future goals? What does it look like for you in your career? What are your desires and how much will you need for coverage? And our sponsor for this episode is PKA Insurance Group. And I just want to put a plug out there for y'all. I mean, I know he's sponsoring this podcast. You could ask me any day before this podcast. Like, he is honest, he is true, and he has helped me with even my grandparents' stuff. He is an expert in the field. My grandparents aren't getting disability insurance. Let me just tell you, he helped me with another insurance product. But the reason why I say that is because you don't often find people who are willing to go the extra mile, who are willing to support you, who are willing to think about who you are, what your needs are, and say, okay, well, I know I'm not taking care of your grandparents, but this is important to you, and you are a client or a customer, and like, I want to do right by you. So all of that to say that the guaranteed standard issue policies are not always the best policies. I see that as a trend, and I think it's actually a great danger for many physicians. And you really need someone you trust, and we trust PKA Insurance Group and Pradeep Auto.
Yeah, I think, Brittany, there might be some people listening to this that maybe don't have disability insurance at all. And maybe they've never even heard of the term GSI policy, right? So we're already above their head. Just to reiterate, disability insurance kicks in if you cannot work, and it will pay you a portion of your salary until you turn 65 or until you get back to full-time work. And there's even usually in a lot of these policies, you can get a rider or an extra benefit for partial disability, meaning if you're able to work some, but you can't work full time, it will still pay out your policy until you go back to work at full time. So unless you are somebody who is ultra rich and is financially independent, you probably need some sort of disability insurance so that if you cannot work, you still have your doctor income or your high income coming in. Because a lot of us have student loans. We've spent years training for our various career fields. And so if something happened and you weren't able to work and bring in that salary, what would you do? How would you support yourself? This is where disability insurance kicks in. And so if you don't have disability insurance, you definitely need to look into it. And then I think for other folks, they say, Leisha, I am not paying for disability insurance because it's not necessarily cheap, and I already get some for free through my job. So why do I even need to worry about this? And I think another caveat to realize if you're somebody who is maybe earlier on in your career, maybe you're mid career and you're relying on your employer disability insurance, I think there's a few things to note. One, that policy is not portable, meaning if you get fired from your job, you get let go from your job, you decide to leave your job, that disability insurance policy does not go along with you. You usually want something in place that will stay in place no matter where you work and that isn't dependent on you continuing to work at your same employer. So that's number one. Number two, sometimes these employer policies are not as good as a policy that you could get on your own. Maybe some of the employer policies say, we'll cover if you can't work at all, but if you could still work as a secretary, if you could still work part-time, we're not going to pay. And so sometimes the employer policies don't give you the level of protection that you actually need. A third reason is that sometimes the employer policies take a long time to kick in. I don't know how it is at your job, Brittany, but at my job, our long-term disability insurance doesn't kick in until you've been out of work for 6 months, not 3 months, but 6 months. I know some people have an emergency fund, but not everybody has an emergency fund that will cover them for 6 months. And then usually once you've been out of work for 6 months, it's not until the end of the 7th month that you actually get paid. And so for some people, you're definitely going to want some policy to sort of kick in a lot sooner than that. The last reason why I think that the employer policies may not be as sufficient as we may assume is because usually there is a cap or there is a limit on how much they will pay. The general rule of thumb is that most people need about 60% of their salary in disability insurance coverage per year, right? And so if you make an annual salary of $100,000, you would want a disability insurance coverage that would pay you about $60,000 that year or $5,000 a month in that case. And the reason why we use 60% as a general rule of thumb is because usually when you have your own disability insurance policy, the money that you get is post-tax. And so you just take your salary and you say, okay, well, what would I have received if I didn't have to pay taxes on that money? And so that's generally speaking where the 60% number comes into play. But for some folks, maybe you're in a blessed position where you get paid multiple six figures a year. Maybe you're making 300K, 200K, 500K a year. Well, your employer is not going to pay 60% of your $500,000 salary or 60% of your $300,000 salary. Usually at most jobs, there is a cap or there is a limit to how much of a monthly benefit they will provide you. And that limit may be a lot less than what you actually take home per month. And so some people, you actually want a disability insurance coverage or policy to kind of bridge that gap to make sure that you have enough to support yourself and your family and your kids and your extended family and whomever while you are disabled. And so those are some of the reasons why maybe the employer policy is insufficient. Then we start looking at individual insurance policies. And Brittany, I think this is where you were talking about, and this is where what you said really kicks in, is that when we start thinking about individual disability insurance policies, at a lot of these programs, they will bring in these folks that sell one particular type of disability insurance policy. And it's called that guaranteed standard issue policy, which can be great. If you are somebody who has had multiple medical issues or whatever, maybe you wouldn't even get approved for disability insurance on your own. And so you need this guaranteed standard issue policy as your safety net. I mentioned before, I think on this podcast, I have a very close friend from medical school who was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So she wouldn't have been approved for disability insurance on her own. And so she had to get this guaranteed standard issue policy. That was the best policy for her. But the problem is, as you mentioned, Brittany, the GSI or the guaranteed standard issue policy is not the best policy for everyone. And the problem is, I think we were leaning so heavily on the GSI policies that some people who would have been better off with a different type of policy weren't even given that as an option. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about here.
Exactly. Just to take a step back. So I appreciate that you brought your friend as an example because the guaranteed standard issue policy does work for some people. This is a policy that is offered oftentimes in your residency program. If there's any attendings who are listening to this and you're mentoring medical students or residents who are thinking about fellowship, you can also get in fellowship programs, are thinking about fellowship, and you have some type of medical condition, then I want you to think about Leisha's friend because perhaps you should make a decision on which program you should go to by researching what options they have for disability insurance if they have a guaranteed standard issue disability insurance program at that institution. Because otherwise, you may not be able to get your own independent policy because of the medical underwriting. So, Leisha, I appreciate that you offer that as an example. And I think that that's one of the critical pieces that people often overlook in their decision about where to go to residency or where to go to fellowship because they don't know that this is going to limit their ability to get the disability insurance coverage. And 1 in 7 physicians are estimated to become disabled during their career. that is a high probability. And so if you have even gone to the hospital before in medical school for, I don't know, some mental health thing, that you want to consider that because that could potentially limit your ability to get your own independent policy. Alicia, as I noted and as you rearticulated, is that the GSI policy is not for everyone. So the guarantee standard issue policy is not for everyone. And sometimes people might get better coverage at a lower cost through a fully underwritten individual policy. Now, that's going to take a little bit more time. You have to do a medical exam. You'll have to go through and find an independent broker who's going to be working with you, not just to secure your policy, but working with you throughout the entire time, right? If you have any issues with your policy, et cetera, in the future. It's not a difficult process, but it's a bit more robust than just getting a guarantee standard issue policy. But I think in the long term, it will help you out. Leisha, you talked about employer policies and kind of some of the drawbacks of employer policies, but let's also have a discussion about the different definitions of disability because I've also seen that when someone is selling an independent policy, the details are in the definition of disability. And I have seen women who have gotten a policy that was disguised as the best policy for them. And the best policy for most physicians is true own occupation, which is basically if you cannot do your work. So if you're a surgeon and you can no longer perform surgery, but you can teach, then you will still get your disability benefit. But not all products, not all definitions of disability are the same. So Alicia, share your experience and I'll share mine as well about understanding the different types of disability definitions. And as you're thinking about your policy, what do you review and what are you specifically looking for?
Yeah, so because I am not financially independent, I know that if I were to unfortunately get disabled, if I end up being 1 in 7 physicians that ends up getting disabled, I would have some issues trying to support myself. And so because of that, I know I need disability insurance. And I think the next question becomes, okay, what type? So we mentioned that you can get some for free through your employer, but oftentimes their definition of disabled is different. And that's what we got to pay attention to. Because the purpose of the policy is that if you can't work, then it kicks in and it supplies you with a monthly income until you get back to full-time work or until you turn age 65 usually. But some policies are very tricky. They might say, well, if you could work in telemedicine, even though you can't operate as a surgeon, you're still quote unquote working, so we're not going to pay. Or some people might say, well, you could work 1 day a week. And since you can work 1 day a week, we're not going to pay because technically you're still working. So for me, it is very important. And I think for anybody listening to this, it's very important to make sure that you understand what that policy is considering disabled to be. And it's not just like, oh, you got into some crazy car accident and you were hospitalized. It could be as simple as you got osteoarthritis in your hands or rheumatoid arthritis in your hands, and now your hands don't work as proficiently as they used to, and now you can't operate as a surgeon. It could be you are physically fine, but life's for you, or somebody passes away in your family, or something tragic happens, and now you have a mental health disorder that prevents you from being able to work at your full capacity. It could also be a chronic illness. And so we have to broaden our horizon on what disabled could be and what that might mean for some people and understand that that may be us. I have heard numerous stories of physicians who never in a million years thought that they would not be able to work as a physician. And unfortunately, something happened in their life that they couldn't have predicted and didn't expect that prevented them from being able to work. And so for them, having that disability insurance was huge. And so now that we know, okay, you probably need some sort of disability insurance, you want to make sure, in my purview, that it is a true own occupation disability insurance policy. Meaning if you cannot do your daily duties and all of them that are included in your work as a physician at full time, it will still pay you, even if you could do some duties and even if you could still work part-time. So for me, I'm looking for that true own occupation definition of disability. I am also looking for these extra, what they call riders or extra protections in that policy. I mentioned a partial disability rider. So if I could still work part-time, but I can't work full-time, it still kicks in. Usually I want some sort of future purchase option so that if my salary drastically increases, then I can increase my benefit without having to requalify from a medical perspective. Usually, some of the policies will have a COLA or cost of living adjustment. We all know things get more expensive with inflation, so that my benefit increases with inflation. $4,000 today doesn't go as far or may not go as far as $4,000 10 years from now. So I need to make sure that my benefit is increasing. Some people with student loans might add in a student loan rider. Usually, if you're permanently disabled and you have federal student loans, you can get your student loans dismissed that way. But for some folks who might become partially disabled, that might be a little bit more of a tricky situation. So I know some people will add in a partial rider for student loans. And so those are some of the things that I'm looking for in a policy. Again, if you're somebody who doesn't have disability insurance and you're not wealthy, so you know you need it, you've got to ask yourself, okay, what kind of policy am I going to get? We just talked about these guaranteed standard issue policies, which could be great for some people, but are not great for everybody. You want to make sure that the policy that you're considering, the policy that you're looking at, has some of these features, right? A true own occupation definition of disability, a cost of living adjustment, a future purchase option so that if your salary increases, the benefit increases, some of those added protections. And one of the things that I find, Brittany, I don't know if this is your experience as well, is that sometimes it's helpful to compare what you could get from a guaranteed standard issue policy if you qualify for that versus what you could get from your own independent policy. And in order to really do that, you really need to contact an independent insurance broker who can actually get you quotes and policies from all of these different major insurance companies. Usually there's about 5 or 6 big companies that give out most of the disability insurance policies. And then so if you're working with an independent broker, they can bring you the highlights or the summaries from all of those different kind of carriers. And then you can choose whether you want to go with one of those or if you want to go with this guaranteed standard issue policy. And one of the things I love is that if you've got a really good agent, I consider Pradeep Otto to be a good agent. Before he was sponsoring this podcast, he helped me with my policy years and years ago. If you've got a really good agent, they'll be honest with you and they'll say, hey, actually, the guaranteed standard issue policy is your best bet right now. Or actually, you could get your own independent policy. And they've done this so much that they'll kind of ask you some preliminary questions themselves and kind of run it by their connects at these different carriers so that they can get a glimpse of whether or not you'll be approved. Because what you don't want to happen is for you to just apply for disability insurance on your own or through somebody who doesn't have this level of experience, and then you end up getting denied. Because if you apply and you get denied, it's going to be hard for you to get any sort of policy again in the future. And that actually happened to one of my friends, Dr. Jimmy Turner. He talked to this insurance broker who said, oh, I'll sell you your own independent disability insurance policy. And they weren't as experienced and just put it on through. And he got denied. He got denied because he has an essential tremor. He was like, I never really thought that that was a big deal. But apparently that was a big deal to those companies at the time. And now he can't get disability insurance. So what I'm saying here is it's important for you to work with somebody who's experienced, work with somebody who can run your stuff kind of in the back ways through some of these carriers and policies to figure out what is the best policy for you. Because I think a lot of insurance brokers pushing these independent policies may not have your best interest in mind. They're just trying to get a commission. And some of these other agents trying to push these GSI policies may also be just trying to earn a commission. And so you want somebody who has the ability to kind of offer both and can help you navigate this process.
So much good there. Yeah. I know you all are probably thinking like, oh, hey, Leisha, you say I could do this. So, I might get denied. But then if I go this other way for the GSI, it may not give me the exact coverage that I need. And I just want to assure you all that it is really, really important. This piece is extremely important because as Leisha has highlighted, we may not always be well. And I know, a lot of our audience are women physicians or people in healthcare. So we understand that because we take care of human beings, but sometimes we just don't think about it happening to ourselves and we keep kicking that can down the road. So I would love for you all to just think about if you're a resident physician or a fellow, or if you are an attending physician and you're working with medical students and you're working with residents and fellows and you hear them talking about disability insurance, encourage them to take a moment of reflection. When was the last time I went to the doctor? I think that's the first question, right? Because I know I don't always get my annual physical exams annually. Like, when was the last time that I went to the physician? Am I healthy? Do I have any past medical history? Have I gone to the emergency department for any reason that might show up in my record? Because as Leisha has highlighted, there are things that we sometimes undervalue that are important to the insurance brokers. And we don't want to put ourselves in a delicate situation where we get denied when we had an option for coverage. So that's what we want you to do, is just to be reflective about what is your own situation and then talk to an expert who has your best interest at heart. And we recommend, like Pradeep or someone maybe that you all have used who have had a really great experience with, but you don't want someone who just is going to sell you any old policy. All insurance brokers will earn a commission. You're not paying them out of your pocket. So they're going to all earn a commission for the service that they are providing to you. You want to ensure that you have a quality service provided to you, because what I see happening right now is in the residency programs, they are often contracted with one specific company. Everybody can get the guaranteed standard issue policy, but only from that company. And so you can only use their approved agents. And that agent may or may not have your best interest at heart. And they, like everyone else, they have a financial incentive to push that specific policy, even if you're healthy, even if you could qualify for a cheaper coverage elsewhere. So it really is upon you to do your due diligence, to do your reflection, to understand what your position is, and then to speak with an expert. We don't want you to get denied when you had an option for coverage, but we also don't want you to overpay and be undercovered. So thank you for raising that point. And then the one thing that I would also like to caution is Leisha talked about the various types of riders that you could add. She also mentioned the elimination period. I think this elimination period is really, really important. When will your benefits kick in? Because that defines how much you need in your emergency savings, right? If your benefits won't kick in until month 7, then you need 7 months of your emergency savings. And I know that many physicians have underfunded emergency funds. And so this is one of the things to consider about how much you want to put in that emergency fund as well. The last thing to highlight is that there's the true own occupation, but then there's also this other definition of disability insurance called own occupation that's not really true own occupation. So basically, what it means is that you get it to cover your physician's salary, right? What you're doing. But if you take another job, so say you're a physician surgeon who has a trimmer and you can no longer operate, but you can teach, then that disability benefit may stop. But I know people who have the true own occupation. One dentist, for example, had hurt his back. He has a true own occupation. Now he's doing something entirely different. He still gets his disability benefit plus the salary that he's making at his other job. And so this is one of our wealth building tools. In order to protect our wealth, then we have to think about our ability to generate income at the level of our training. And so if you have a true own occupation disability insurance product and you cannot work doing your specified work at the time of your disability, but you can do something else, you can get that and the salary of something else. So just really considering and examining the definition of disability is one of the critical pieces before you choose a policy.
Yeah, I would say one last thing to remember is that actually the price varies depending on what state you're in when you get it. I don't know if you knew this, Brittany. The insurance companies have figured out that people who live in certain states are more likely to participate in what they call risky activities that might increase their risk of becoming disabled. People who like to rock climb, people who like to surf, people who like to do some of those activities. And so it was so funny. I have a friend who lives in California or was living in California at the time, and I was in Georgia. I told her what I was paying, and she was like, "Oh, I could do $100 a month or whatever." And her policy was like double that. And she was like, "Well, hold on. You told me it was going to be $100 and they quoted me $250." And it's so funny. So we went to the insurance broker and they were like, "Yeah, there's a drastic difference because she lives in California and you live in Georgia." And so it was one of those things where she was like, "Well, should I move?" It was so funny. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, because somebody might be hearing this because maybe they're about to graduate from medical school, or they're about to finish their training as a resident or as a fellow, or moving states, maybe because they just got a different job as an attending. So just keeping that in mind of like, hold on, let me talk to an insurance broker and see if I should get this policy before I leave my current state, or if I should wait until I arrive in my new state. So just something to kind of keep in mind there.
I love that little hack. It's like a geographical arbitrage for your disability insurance.
Exactly.
And I know that I've focused a lot kind of like on residency programs and fellowship, because specifically the work that I'm doing in the GSI policy, this has come up a lot in discussions that I have with resident physicians right now, especially as they're planning, they're graduating for residency, they're moving on. But to your point, Leisha, as you opened up, there are some early career attendings who also don't have disability insurance. And I had one coaching client who that was the case. And recently she explored her disability insurance product and she realized that because of her age, because she had like some career delays and things of that nature, that the policy was a lot more expensive. And then to add all of the different riders made it even more more expensive. I just wanted to highlight that as one of the reasons why having a trusted independent broker is so important because they can strategize around that. And so for her, they strategized the different amounts of coverage. What would those costs be? Adding on the various riders, what would those costs be? What they did was instead of adding on the cost of living adjustment, they removed that rider but got her a bigger benefit so that it would still outpace inflation over time without having the additional cost. And it is a cost benefit analysis as you're working through choosing the right plan for you. It can be quite complicated. So you want to just have an expert. So whether you are a resident physician or fellow, figuring out whether you should go with an independent broker or GSI policy, or your early career trying to figure out the right mix because you delayed this, you didn't make the decision during your residency years, having a trusted source, having an expert, having someone who not just cares about the commissions, but they care about you as an individual is so critical to this financial decision. I appreciate that we're having this discussion, and I would encourage anybody who's listening to this episode to talk to a resident, to talk to a medical student, to talk to your colleague about disability insurance, because I think it's a conversation that we have often too late or we don't have at all, and we leave people in this kind of darkness of choosing on their own, and we just don't get enough education about it.
Yeah. And so even if you have disability insurance, I would encourage you to still reach out to an independent broker to make sure you have enough given your current salary and your family's needs. Because maybe you got it a few years ago and now you've expanded your family. Perhaps you have gotten married, have more kids, or just switched jobs entirely. Maybe your income has increased. And so I would encourage you to reach out to an independent insurance broker. Obviously, PKA Insurance Group is the sponsor for our episode, and we trust Pradeep and his team there. But just wanted to put out this PSA that, hey, I know that this is the time of year we're planning vacations and all of that stuff, but please make sure that you are also protecting yourself through long-term disability insurance.
All right, Leisha. So what are you doing fun with your money?
Yeah, so I'm stocking up and getting some more like personal maintenance products. So everything from like hairsprays and conditioners to new makeup, needs some more foundation, that sort of thing, and skin cleansers. And then also, I have just ordered this thing called self-tanning lotion or foam. Have you heard of this before?
What? Girl, you got all the melanin. You got all the melanin you need.
Okay, listen to me. Hear me out. I do have some melanin, right? I love my melanin. No issues with the melanin. My concern, though, is that the melanin does not all appear at the same time at the same rate. So different parts of my skin will tan at different rates. And so in the springtime, hence right now, going through a little phase, okay, where I got certain parts that are a little lighter than others, got some hypopigmentation going on. And once it's all tan, it's fine. Or once it's all not tan, it's fine. But it's like these in between, like the spring and the fall are very interesting times for my skin. I talked to my dermatologist. And she was like, all right, Leisha, here's the thing. There's nothing wrong with your skin. Like, there's not a medical condition. It's just the way God made you. And I was like, we got to do something else, doc. And so she was like, okay, you can go and get laser treatment. There are these lasers that will kind of help with people who have pigmentation issues. Some people have hyperpigmentation, aka they have dark spots, and other people have hypopigmentation, aka they have light spots or light patches. And lasers now are very good. Now you'd have to go to someone who's trained. If you are going to get laser to fix pigmentation issues, this is not something that you want to do at like a med spa. This is something that you want to go to a board certified dermatologist who has expertise in laser therapy to correct color pigmentation. But that is not cheap, especially if you're going to the specialist to get that done. So she was like, you could go that route, or you could try these self-tanning foams. And she, who herself is a Black dermatologist, was like, to be honest, girl, this is what I use. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I'm going on vacation. I want to look good. And so she was like, it's this foam. You rub it on, you leave it on for 6 hours, and then you rinse it off, and it lasts for about a week. So she was like, whenever I'm on vacation and I'm about to be in a bikini somewhere, this is what I use. I was like, give me the brand. I'm going to try it. I mean, it's like $20, right? So I have very little to lose. But yeah, so I added that to my Amazon cart, and I'll let you know if it was a disaster waiting to happen or if it actually worked. I will report back.
Okay. Yeah. Please report back. I've just accepted, and maybe this is a mind shift that is required, that having melanated skin comes with some variation in what it looks like. Sometimes some areas are going to be hyperpigmented. Some areas are going to be hypopigmented. And I've just kind of accepted that I'm a blend of various shades of brown in different parts of my body. But I completely understand what you're saying. And it's all about showing up in the way that makes you feel most comfortable. And I have really appreciated the investment in myself when I got my eyebrows done. And so I've been thinking about, I have not, but I've been thinking about doing other things payouts, maybe fillers or micro needling or something like that, especially as your girl is approaching her 40th.
Yep. It's getting there, sis. But you still look great. You still look great.
Thank you. I'm like, okay. So I appreciate that. And sorry for my judgment initially.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine. I'm a little vain. I can own it. I'm vain. I'll own it.
No, I don't think it's about vanity. I think it's really about just showing up and feeling confident in the skin that you're in. And so I really appreciate that. Okay. So now for me, I have recently talked a lot about purchasing clothes, which usually is not something that I do. But my cousin's wedding is coming up soon. So we're trying to coordinate our outfits, and Brooke is in the wedding. They wanted KJ to be in the wedding, but his personality is like, nah, I'm just going to sit here with my mama and be happy. So I've been purchasing a lot of clothes for us, new dresses for me, spending a lot of time looking at the sizing, looking at the reviews. So I'm really excited about being able to show up kind of as a cohesive looking family and using that as an opportunity to capture some shots. So that's how I've been spending my money for fun, is just buying new outfits for the family.
I love that. I got to see some photos.
Yeah.
I got to see some photos. All right, you all. Hopefully, you found this episode helpful. If you are somebody who is a physician, or maybe you're in another high earning field, be sure to consider long term disability insurance. And of course, you can reach out to our sponsors of this episode, Pradeep Auto, Matthew Peterson, and their team at PKA Insurance Group. The link is in our show notes. We can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittany Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, you know. So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.